Great. So with that, we're going to go over to the affirmative. Zaylen, you have 5 minutes for your opening speech to lay out your case.
Okay. Judge is ready.
Judge ready.
Okay, opponent ready.
Yeah.
I would like to start my time in 3, 2, 1, now. Hello, my name is Zaylen, and I'm arguing on the affirmative side of the resolution. There should be a global minimum corporate tax rate. I would like to define some keywords, outline the problem we are trying to solve, and describe my plan, my burden, and finally, my contentions. First of all, definitions. I would like to define global as for the entire world geographically, not just one country. Why are we even debating this resolution? Well, if you research enough, you'll find that trillions of dollars that were meant for people, for hospitals and infrastructure, for facilities, poverty, and so on, have been sucked dry by these corporations. So we know that undeniably something must come back to stop this from worsening. So I have a solution. My plan is to initiate a global minimum corporate tax rate of 10% tax if a business has an annual income of over 812 million US dollars, meaning that they are a multinational corporation as defined by the OECD. A version of this plan was created by the OECD and named the GMT, Global Minimum Corporate Tax Policy, and is actually already on track to being put into practice in over 130 countries because of its popularity. My version of this would allow for countries to initiate the global minimum corporate tax rate in a 10-year time frame, allowing nations to choose when they want to create the GMT law. It also means that the global minimum corporate, also for my version, the global minimum corporate tax rate is 10%, not 15%. My burden/framework. I, as the affirmative, need to convince you judges that my plan, based on a cost-benefit analysis, wins. This means that if I can prove that my plan has more net benefits than the alternative, then I win this debate. Contentions. Contention 1, tax avoidance by multinational corporations. For too many years, companies such as HP, FedEx, and Salesforce have avoided paying taxes. This is because multi-million making companies are experienced enough to know all the loopholes, no matter how small, and use them to their fullest capacity. Those large businesses have avoided paying about $8.5 billion collectively, an average of $155 million per company, as recorded in just 1 year in 2020, according to the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy. This is not fair. What about the smaller companies, which are paying more taxes but have less income? Well, the bigger corporations are paying none at all. What I'm saying is that there has to be a bare minimum of what is required of these huge businesses. There has to be a limit to how much large corporations can continue to avoid taxation. I'm not saying that companies always have to pay a huge amount of taxes, but I'm saying that even if companies displace their taxes, they still have to at least contribute to the public by paying nowhere near the amount that they would have originally had to pay. Subpoint A, social responsibility. By making businesses pay their taxes, it aligns with the principle that companies should contribute to the public. By doing this, the government will be able to have enough money to pay for projects that keep people safe, healthy, and happy. If businesses don't pay their taxes, they are keeping that money for themselves while depriving others around them, making a bad industrial influence. A global minimum corporate tax rate would be fair and equal by making all businesses contribute to the country where they are based. Subpoint B, the strain on smaller companies. Smaller businesses often suffer from a disproportionate tax burden compared to large corporations that have invested a lot of money to expertly conduct complex tax planning strategies. Smaller corporations feel the strain of having to pay taxes that a small business shouldn't have to pay. According to many different surveys, approximately 80% of small businesses have had to shut down due to disproportionate taxes. This is a clear indicator that having a minimum global minimum corporate tax rate for larger companies and lower taxes for smaller businesses would deeply benefit the success of smaller companies. Convention 2, tax competition. Tax competition is when a nation lowers its tax rates so corporations will move to their country. These companies are able to pay less taxes because nations are setting lower tax bars. This can cause the government to lose money and not be able to fund other projects. The government shouldn't have to lose money from not collecting corporate taxes because the companies can pay their own. There are many corporations that do this, which could force the government to raise their taxes so that they are getting the same amount of money, but that would just make the smaller businesses pay even more. If there's a global minimum corporate tax rate, then countries can't make the tax competition lower than 10%. Thank you, judges, for listening to this debate, and I would like to yield my time now.
Excellent. We now have 2 minutes on the clock for a cross-examination of the affirmative by the negative. Manu, 2 minutes beginning when you're ready.
Okay, starting in 3, 2, 1. How will a bankrupt country enforce corporate taxes? Like Sri Lanka, for example?
Huh?
How will a country that's bankrupt enforce taxes? Some examples are Sri Lanka, Lebanon, and Pakistan.
Okay, well, here's the thing, is that with a global minimum corporate tax rate, it doesn't need to just be the country that enforces it. Because this was agreed on by the United Nations. And the United Nations is a group of countries that help each other. And so just
Another
because,
country can't enforce taxes in another country. You know that, right? The US can't enforce taxes in like Venezuela. That's not how that works.
I'm not saying that they're making a law, but what I'm saying is that the US can like give money, donate money to, let's say, Sri Lanka or whatever, which will basically boost
But why would they do that? That's not included in your plan.
I don't think I need to specify the exact details of
Yeah, you do, because otherwise then you're showing that bankrupt countries won't be able to carry out your plan.
Okay, so I specified it.
So how will bankrupt countries carry out your plan?
With donations from the other countries because they're part of the United Nations, which
Why would they get donations? That's the thing.
is because all the countries are agreeing to
They
have
aren't getting donations now, so why they aren't getting donations now, so why would they get them later?
they aren't getting donations right now. Like, if in the real world, they aren't getting donations right now because the global minimum corporate tax rate hasn't been created yet. I mean, like, it hasn't been initiated.
But why would it cause countries to donate?
It wouldn't. Well, first of all, if you initiate a global minimum corporate tax rate, it's if you want it, it's because it's beneficial to your country, and so
Yeah, that's why not everyone wants it, right?
huh?
That's why not every country wants the minimum
Yeah.
tax rate, right? So why are we enforcing it in every country?
Well, first of all, you can't say that not every country wants. Time's done, but you can't say that not every country wants it because my plan is not the plan that has been proposed.
So
So
if
we're
a
going to go
country
now.
hasn't accepted a corporate tax, why would it accept a different one?
So yeah, pardon me, we're out of time. We're going to go into our next period of prep time. 2 minutes, after which we hear from the negative for up to 7 minutes. 2 minutes beginning now. Prep has concluded. We are going to the negative for their opening speech. Manu, 7 minutes beginning when you're ready.
Okay, starting my time in 3, 2, 1. Hello, I'm Manu. I'm arguing in the negative side for this resolution. First of all, just one definition real quick. Global as everywhere in the world geographically. So I guess we can agree on that. With discussion about corporate taxes on the rise, many governments have begun to talk of a global corporate tax, a tax that would tax businesses specifically for their income. However, all is not what it seems. In fact, a global corporate tax would be terrible for the world economy. Contention 1, reason 1. It's already been proposed and was not accepted in more than 50 countries. The OECD has already proposed a global corporate tax, and it failed miserably. While yes, a large portion of the countries did accept, the fact that more than 50 countries have rejected the offer shows that realistically, a global corporate tax is infeasible. My opponent has already stated his definition as like everywhere geographically. If 50 countries reject the offer, that's not everywhere geographically, and thus this plan can never be carried out. It won't be agreed on globally if it has already failed in the past. Now, I get that my opponent has his plan at a 10% tax rate instead of 15%. However, the percentage isn't the issue here. It's the fact that all of these countries are either developing or bankrupt, like Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Lebanon, Rwanda. All these countries can't enforce a corporate tax properly or don't want to enforce it because it would harm themselves. That is why these countries are not accepting and why the plan cannot go through. As a sub point, even countries that are like economic superpowers like America wouldn't even be able to effectively enforce corporate taxes because of the weak IRS. We already see large corporations evading these organizations, as stated by the NPR, due to it being underfunded for decades. With the largest economic powerhouse being unable to enforce this plan, who knows how many others would not be able to. The fact is that this plan simply will not work. Contention 2 is that it destroys communist countries like Russia. First of all, communist countries would never actually agree to a proposal like this in the first place, as the only time they've ever actually done things correctly and diplomatically bargained with each other was during the Cold War. But even putting that aside, if this resolution magically forced communist countries to accept the corporate tax, which it doesn't, but even if it did, it would completely destroy their social trust in the economy. Communist countries are almost always socialists too. And the properties of that are that they are known for publicly owned property and exchanging the citizens' rights for their security. Russia is already doing what a proposed corporate tax would do. They can do what they want with their citizens, unlike a democracy. Implementing a separate corporate tax would break the relationship between the government and its citizens, which could lead to an economic and social collapse. Not to mention how fickle a country at war is like Russia. The fact is, communist countries will not accept this proposal either. Now for why the proposal is actually just terrible. Contention 3, a corporate tax would severely hurt the investment and economy of developing countries. When a corporate tax is implemented into any country, it will essentially get rid of its status as a tax haven, which is defined as a place where there are minimal taxes you pay, allowing people to pay less in taxes, protect their money, and bring in major investments, creating new job opportunities. Many developing countries are tax havens, and they rely on this status to help create investments for themselves as well as boost their economy. By implementing a global corporate tax, we would be seeing a lot of these developing countries suffer from a lack of investments. A lack of investments would lead to a decline in job opportunities, which is proven by various websites such as Infopedia and PBS that a lack of investments from an implementation of a corporate tax would lead to less job opportunities. And it would overall completely destroy the economy of those countries. It is also why many of the countries rejected the original global corporate tax I mentioned earlier. But that isn't the only reason, as I mentioned before, which they can't enforce it properly. So we have over 50 countries who can't enforce the tax properly. The tax actually harms their country instead of helps it. And on top of that, there are more communist countries who won't accept this proposal either. Either way, no matter how you look at it, this plan will never pass, no matter what corporate tax value you give. There was also the issue with the opponent's plan, where since he lowered it from 15% to 10%, all of his benefits about like making smaller companies, like helping smaller companies and making larger companies pay their taxes, all of these benefits might not be, as he said, in his case, because as I look at all his sources, all of them are based upon the original 15% tax. So it wouldn't generate as much revenue or help as much or anything from what he's saying in his evidence because he changed the value of the tax. Now to go on to his contentions as well as a few counter plans I made. He mentioned in his first contention that, first of all, larger corporations sucks like money out of smaller corporations, and that was why this tax was needed, because it would help smaller corporations build back their money. Also, that large corporations avoid paying taxes and smaller companies pay more taxes than large companies. However, this is easily solved with the counterplan, which is instead of adding a separate corporate tax on top of the already existing taxes, we could just try to enforce the regular taxes more efficiently, as well as making them proportional to their income. That way, we don't have to implement a separate corporate tax on top of the regular tax, as the opponent's plan is doing. And instead, we can just use the already existing tax to do all of the benefits if those apply. If those apply, because as I mentioned earlier in my speech with my contentions, they do not apply and they in fact hurt economies. But another counterplan would be obviously just to let countries who wants to implement the corporate tax to let them implement it. And then the countries who don't want to implement it, they don't have to. Just let countries do what they want with their own domestic interests instead of forcing a corporate tax onto them. That way, we don't have bankrupt countries who can't enforce the opponent's plan because they don't have enough money or resources. My opponent did bring up a point in cross-ex about donations to countries like Sri Lanka. However, he never specified why or even how the bankrupt countries would get donations specifically because a corporate tax was implemented, especially when they aren't getting donations from major powerhouses right now. So basically what that means is that
so we're out of time for that speech. We're going now into our cross-examination. We have 2 minutes on the clock for the affirmative cross-examination of the negative. Zaylen, 2 minutes when you're ready.
Judge ready? Judge is ready. Opponent ready?
Yeah.
I would like to start the cross-examination time now. Okay, so first of all, what is IRS?
The IRS is basically an organization within the United States that manages taxes. That specific example was saying that an economic powerhouse like the US has such a weak system that enforces taxes that it wouldn't even be able to enforce your corporate tax. And with the biggest economic powerhouse in the world unable to enforce it, who knows what would happen to other countries.
Okay, so next, could you just tell me your different contentions and subpoints?
Okay, contention 1 was that it's already been proposed and wasn't accepted. Subpoint 1 was that obviously the agreement made by the OECD and how it wasn't accepted. The subpoint was the thing about the IRS in America. Contention 2 was that it destroys communist countries like Russia. And contention 3 was that it would hurt developing countries.
Okay. So next. Next is, wouldn't you agree that with a global minimum corporate tax, there can still be tax haven structures?
Could you please elaborate? What do you mean by tax payment structures?
Tax haven structures, meaning.
Oh, no, I do not agree with that because it's already been proven by the OECD themselves that tax havens will be eradicated with corporate taxes.
Well, yes, but those are the old type of tax haven structures. But there can still be these new tax haven structures because before the limit was 0. Now the limit would be 15%. So, because like with tax haven structure, you can.
I think you're underestimating how much the taxes in other countries would have to increase Because let's say that 15% is the bare minimum and it is what the tax haven structure you say will be. That would mean that other countries would have like 30, 35%, maybe even 40% corporate taxes, which would be completely ridiculous and completely infeasible.
So we're out of time for that cross-ex. We are now going to be going into our next period of prep time. We have 2 minutes, after which we hear from the affirmative for up to 4 minutes. 2 minutes beginning now. That prep time is concluded. We're going to the affirmative. We have 4 minutes on the clock for that affirmative speech, beginning when you're ready.
Judge ready? Opponent ready?
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to start my time now. Okay, so first of all, my opponent's first of all, remember my plan. My plan is is the GMT, Gold Minimum Corporate Tax Policy, that was created by the OECD with a few modifications. First modification is it can be implemented within a 10-year time frame, which means if you're not in a good stage of development, then you can wait or do it at a different time. Second of all, it's 10%, not 15%, so it gives a more variational choice. Next, is the taxes, like my opponent mentioned that some nations are gonna have their tax rate be like 35 to 40, but that doesn't have to happen. If it's above 10%, it can stay, it can be kept. If it's lower than 10%, it'll just, you can bring it up just to 10%, and you're just getting more money, which brings me to to donate to and help build facilities, donate to hospitals, schools, libraries, and just basically all of that stuff. And then also, I don't really get why my plan would be terrible. And one other thing I don't get is why my opponent hasn't given a plan of their own. So meaning I don't see a plan. It could just be, their plan could just be, let's just not have a global minimum corporate tax rate, but they haven't given a plan, so I can't argue off of anything that they've said because if they take down my argument, what else are we gonna do? Yeah. And then there can still be tax haven structures at 10%. or 15%, or something it's like that. Like there can still be tax haven structures, just the limit is 10 or 15 or just whatever, like instead of 0. And I don't really get why my opponent is arguing that that's not possible. And then also you're talking about like these 50 countries, over 50 countries have denied it, but have denied that plan, but that is a different plan, okay? First of all, what if they're a developing country who has denied the plan? In that case, you can do like anywhere in 10 years, and why would a developing country, why would it be bad to have a global minimum corporate tax rate? Why? Wouldn't you want higher taxes so that you can like build up your economy and the needs of your people? Like, why wouldn't you? And I think that's pretty much what my opponent is arguing, but I don't see any reason behind that. And then also I don't know, like the communism in Russia. Well, no one said that Russia needs to take 10%. It can be more. It can be more. And this thing is that this is 10% yearly, annually, not 10% daily or monthly. So just at least 10% over the entire year. So it gives a minimum that so that companies won't move to like that country. Thank you, and I'd like to yield my time now.
We are now going into a period of prep time. We have 2 minutes on the clock, after which we hear from the negative for a final speech. 2 minutes of prep beginning now. Great, that concludes that prep time. So we have 5 minutes on the clock for the negative, beginning when you're ready.
Okay, is everyone ready? Okay, judge ready? Everyone ready? Okay, let me get my timer. Okay, starting my time in 3, 2, 1. First of all, I've already won this debate on topicality because my opponent dropped my first contention, which part of the argument was that the plan could never be enforced because of how many countries rejected the offer. But not only that, but because of like my points about bankruptcy and how they would never be able to enforce it anyways. And because they dropped that, that means they're they dropped it, which means that they didn't respond to it, which means that that argument already goes to me, and I've already won that argument. And because they did that, that means that they're basically agreeing with the fact that some countries just can't enforce the proposal, and that means that it can't they can't carry out the resolution. Now I'll go over some things my opponent mentioned in their speech. They mentioned that I needed a plan for them to argue against. In the negative doesn't need a plan in debate, so I don't know where he got that from. But if he's talking about a counter plan, I provided two. I provided that we should tax larger corporations. Not tax larger. I said that we should. I say we should tax larger corporations with the already existing tax instead of a new corporate tax, as well as adding proportional taxes instead of just making a completely new corporate tax, which he dropped because they didn't know it existed. And countries, my other counter plan was that countries who want to can implement a corporate tax. We don't need to force it onto them. We can just the countries can choose. And they didn't respond to that either. So both of those go to me. They said that 10 years was plenty of time for a developing country to accept the plan. Some of the countries I mentioned have been developing for half a century. I don't think they're going to stop developing within the next 10 years. So that point is completely invalid because, yeah, well, maybe one or two might come out of developing. A majority of them won't. A majority of them will still be developing and won't be able to carry out the plan. The 10% tax rate compared to the 15% from the OECD doesn't make a difference. Actually, it does make a difference because it goes against their own benefits, because the benefits they listed were only because of the 15% tax rate proposed by the OECD. And without that, their benefits are meaningless. So that also goes to me. But what I was going to say was that the 10% tax rate, the 15% negatives still apply to it because all the negatives revolve around how they won't be able to enforce it. And no matter what the percentage of the tax is, the method of enforcing will always stay the same, which means that even if it's a 1% corporate tax versus 70% corporate tax, it still won't be able to be enforced and is thus meaningless. He mentioned something lastly about Russia and that they can put the corporate tax value, they can raise it above 10%. The issue isn't that Russia needs more than 10%. It's that 10% itself is still detrimental to their economy and social standings because, like I said in my previous speech, a communist and socialist country, it revolves all around publicly owned property and rights for freedom, so rights for security. So if you implemented a separate corporate tax when Russia is already doing its own thing with publicly owned property, it would undermine the social relations it has with its citizens. So that's everything they said, my opponent said in their last speech. So now I'll summarize my own speech. I had my two counter plans, which I believe I've proved are better than the opponent's plan, since if country wants to implement it and versus they don't, that's better than being forced to implement it. And then not implementing a separate corporate tax but using an existing tax should be better. So those are my voters. My technically topicality arguments, also another voter. Communist countries destroyed and developing countries destroyed, another voter. For all the reasons.
Cool. With that, we're going now into a period of prep time for 2 minutes, beginning now. Great. Prep time is up. We're going to the affirmative for one final speech. That's 3 minutes. Zaylen, beginning when you're ready.
Okay, judge ready? Judges ready? Opponent ready?
Yeah.
I would like to start my time now. Okay, so there are a bunch of things I would like to discuss in my final speech. So first of all, is when he was talking about that I didn't respond to his the companies over 50 countries have denied doing the GMT, global minimum tax policy. I respond to it by saying, well, this is a different thing and you can't predict those countries' outcomes. And here's another thing is that if you're including like that point, it's unfair because that would automatically mean that the negative would win. And that just leaves no chance for the affirmative. And second of all, is he's saying that I didn't respond to his first contention. Oh, sorry. But I did respond to his first contention, like I said, and his statement on bankruptcy, and I did respond to that. So I do not see why he says that that should be his because I did. Yeah, and you provided, and my opponent provided 2 plans, and if I don't know, and first of all, he didn't specify that he was going to use either of those plans, and second of all, in his second speech, he specified that he was going to use at least one of those plans, but I don't know which plan, or if he's using both of them. So either way, I still can't argue against it. And is 10 years is enough time for countries that have multinational companies. So I'm not talking about just like a little island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean or something. I'm talking about these countries that that have these big multinational companies with enough business that these multinational companies are going to be able to earn enough money. And so they have to be into these countries. If for a multinational corporation to move to one of these countries, it has to be developed enough. And so 10 years is enough time for it to finish developing and initiate the global minimum corporate tax policy. Next is in the Russia thing, when we talk about Russian communism, is Russia and communism is, I don't see why having a global minimum corporate tax policy would undermine the economy, because there are still companies there if we're going to earn money, because companies go there to earn money, and so they're still going to earn money to be taxed on. Also, when he's talking about that since I changed my plan, those benefits are still going to be valid. Well, you're still contributing to the U.S. government, which is still like paying for schools, hospitals, playground, just everything sort of. And the other benefits will still stand as well. Thank you, judges, for listening to this debate, and I hope you cast your vote for the affirmative.
Great. So what we're going to do now is we're going to pause and the judges will deliberate. Once I've received all 3 ballots, I'm going to call on the judges to give verbal feedback to the debaters and announce their decisions. All right, the judges have deliberated, so we're going to go to the judges in the reverse order of ballot receipt to give their feedback. So we're going to start with John.
All right. Pulling up my ballot. All right. So I guess just to sorry, I messed up my computer there for a second. So just to get it out of the way, I chose Manu as the winner of the debate. I thought both of you did a really good job just being well-spoken and confident. I thought both of you had good, strong arguments. Both of you also had some weaker arguments, but I felt that Manu just overall did a better job capitalizing on kind of some of Zaylen's weaker arguments, whereas I felt Zaylen didn't quite do the same. Additionally, I felt like Manu presented as well researched It sounded like he knew what he was talking about. And I felt like Manu was just kind of consistently strong across the board. Zaylen, I thought you also did a good job, but I felt your performance throughout the debate kind of weakened as time went on. But overall, both of you did a great job. I really enjoyed listening to the debate. And I hope both of you also had fun.
Great. Going on to our next judge, Kinesia.
Okay. I actually chose Zaylen as the winner for this round. And both like John said, both of you guys did a really good job, and I was really invested in both of your arguments. But I feel like Zaylen had a strong argument for the reasons why a global minimum tax on multinational corporations would be beneficial. Manu's focus was mostly on like undercutting his opponent's argument, which is not a bad strategy, but I would have also liked to see like reasons why this status quo is also like a good one to maintain. And I'd like to see the merits of the current system. Also, the focus on whether or not the tax would be feasible. Well, that is a good argument. The debate question was if it should be presented rather than if it can be. Whether or not it can be is also a major factor in determining if this is a good idea or not. But by presenting the situation as this can never be done anyway, so why are we talking about this? It kind of undercuts the purpose of the debate. And that's about it.
Great. Moving on to our third and final judge, Hannah.
Hi. Okay. Well, I agree with both of the judges that came before me. I think both individual debaters had really awesome points. I thought both debaters had things that they needed to work on. I'm going to put you in a little bit of suspense. I'm not going to tell you who I voted for until the end. But the first thing that I wanted to say was overarchingly, I think both debaters need a little bit of work on impacting. Specifically, when we're looking to Zaylen and to Manu, there were just certain areas of the debate that could have been benefited with more of that clarity, more of that structure. So for example, on Zaylen's side specifically, when you're talking about the idea of the 15 to 10% change, I wanted to know why we made that change. What was the specific actor that made you decide to change from a 15% tax rate to a 10% tax rate? Explaining that would have made it a little bit easier to follow that plan and probably would have made it a little easier to understand what the actual benefit of that would have been. Whereas on Manu's side, I liked that you brought in counter plans, but the counter plans to me weren't really counter plans so much as just extra argumentation. I say that specifically because neither of the counter plans really go super into detail. And then another area that I thought was really good was just both individual debaters were really able to volley back and forth on those arguments. Generally speaking, I thought the argumentation did go a little bit downhill at the end, Zaylen, and I did think that Manu was better at speaking. However, in total, the reason why I ended up voting in favor of the individual that I did was because I felt that overall their arguments that were set up were better and were more consistently agreed to and not refuted. So when we look to that, I actually did vote in favor of the affirmative, Zaylen. Specifically, when you look to the idea of the 10-year timeline, that was actually brought up at the very beginning, and he continuously brought that through the entire case. And it wasn't ever a suggestion that the developing countries that were mentioned by the negative were not able to continue developing after they implemented, so much as it gives them the time to continue developing to the point where they can implement this within the next 10 years. So that was my decision. Congrats on Zaylen, but Manu, I thought you were a fantastic speaker.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we actually do have a determination on speaker awards as well. It was a real nail biter. Almost everybody in the tournament had somewhere in the low 28s coming out of the preliminary rounds. And actually, we had a tie for our first place speaker coming out of the preliminary rounds between Manu and Zaylen, each with 28.4 average speaker points. So we break that based on speaker points in the elimination rounds, in which case we only have one for this tournament, which is the final round. And Manu is victorious on that. So Manu is our first place speaker for this tournament, followed by Zaylen. And then in third place, we have Alan from the Ferret Club. That brings our Spring Classic for 2024 to a close. Thanks so much to our wonderful judges and to our great competitors for bringing forward some fantastic arguments. Our next tournament is coming up on June 1st. That's the Speakers League annual meet, or the SLAM tournament. So make sure to register for that. We actually already have some registrations in for that, so the excitement is up. Judges, also mark that off on your calendar because, you know, hopefully we'll be able to bring you back for some judging at that point as well. If you have any questions, let me know on the way out. Otherwise, that brings the tournament to a close, and watch your email for the full results and ballots later today.